I remember there were people singing along, like a lot of people singing along. And I realized that people were coming to see us, and people were excited to see us.
I was recording with my friend Alicia, who lives in Portland, and she said, Petra, we should go see this band play. They're called the Decemberists, and they're playing at, I forget the name of the club. But it was kind of late, and I was tired, and I wasn't really in the mood to go out. But I said, okay, and so I went and I saw them, and they were interesting. I wasn't like any band I've seen, really. And I met them all, and they were really nice. And backstage, or actually it was downstairs in this big room, I told Colin if he ever needed violin recorded on anything to let me know. And he said, oh, great, okay. And Colin happened to call me. And he said, actually, we're recording our record, and we'd love to have you play violin and maybe sing. And I said, okay, great.
I had felt during the recording of Her Majesty, the Decemberists, that there was something about the studio that I had felt stymied by, that I had felt kind of not necessarily intimidated, but just, you know, just the ticking of the studio clock and the in-house engineer and just all those sorts of things, that I wanted to try to create an environment that was really just kind of open and free and neutral, and something that we could just build from the ground up. And you know, you hear about people recording in churches and castles and things all the time. And so we were looking around for a warehouse or a church or something, and a friend of mine had suggested this church on Prescott in Northeast that was a formerly Baptist church that had been bought by this kind of lefty guy who was living in the back rooms and was renting out the main part of the church to different organizations like Food Not Bombs, and I'd actually gone to an art opening there once, and Walla had a kind of a portable system that he could move into any place, so he was up for it. So I asked the owner, David, if we could rent it to record a record in, and he went for it. He told me later that he had assumed that recording a record meant just setting like a few microphones and a few instruments. He did not really know the amount of space and equipment that was involved.
Pretty big tangle of gear.
Yeah. Initially, I had gone in there and had walked through with the owner, David, and it said, and had assumed that most of that stuff was going to be out of there. And I said, well, you'll move the pews, right? And he's like, oh, yeah, I can move the pews out. And move some of these toys and things out of the way. It's like, oh, yeah, that'll be gone. And then when we went in to start setting it up, all the stuff was, not a thing had been moved. There was still, you know, like plates out and things like that.
When I had heard of the idea of the church, I was really excited. And then we got to the church, and it was a total mess.
I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone.
There was lots of toys to play with.
Look at that. He doesn't have a name yet.
Everywhere there was these little fans that had Martin Luther King Jr. on them.
Just chaotic, like there's a swing set and there's
like a dark room cylinder that you could climb into.
Like pews like arranged in sort of weird ways.
I didn't see any stained glass windows. I didn't see anything that resembled God. I saw like a mannequin arm, like a fuzzy, furry thing on the couch that looked like a cat, but it wasn't. Dolls, tchotchkes everywhere, a swing.
I mean, it was fun to be in this place. It had a swing in it.
And if you don't love me, let me go. And if you don't love me, let me go.
And all different kinds of instruments everywhere lying around. It was pretty neat.
They had a piano in there. It was set up right at the altar.
So we just kind of set about just realizing that it was maybe just meant to be, and set about setting up the studio in there.
It was just totally surreal. And then because it was all just one big room, it was great for how everything sounded. Things sounded amazing in there.
Eli, the barrel boy of the old town, sells coal and marigolds, and he cries out all down the day.
But it meant you could only record one thing at a time, and you had to do everything on headphones.
Below the tamaracks, he's crying. Corn cobs and candle wax for the buying all down the day.
So in some ways it was very chaotic, because it was sort of like headphones are just so tiring after a while.
I think the silliness is brought out because of that space. If you can imagine, instead of having a control room where there's someone's in there tracking and you're in the control room, you're like talking about the person's performance or whatever. Here we were all in the same room, including Chris Walla, the engineer.
And you couldn't isolate, you couldn't play as a band, you know, you couldn't get together and come together in a room and play together. So it was a little bit more stressful.
It was just so odd and crazy and a little bit chaotic. It really made it really fun.
Get on. 6 o'clock in the morning, we're still in the studio, and I have to shave, man. I have a court date.
And Chris Walla is so good at working in that environment and keeping things really spontaneous, because a lot of engineers, I think, would get overwhelmed in that kind of environment.
I think we knew that if we had a different kind of space, that he could really go crazy and make that record sound good.
In my opinion, a musician is always trying to make the record that they had dreamed of as a kid being a musician.
You're striving for this perfect record, and you're striving for this perfection that you never enjoy beyond the month afterwards.
And so Picaresque was the first time that we had actually had the time and the money to really see all those ideas to the very utmost and make the biggest sounding record that we possibly could.
It's a wider variety of sound than, say, Her Majesty was, or Castaways and Cutouts. You know, more folk instrumentation, the banjo, the hurdy-gurdy. Dulcimer. Whether you can completely hear it or not, I don't know. I think so.
When we did Mariner's Revenge, that's a highlight, because we recorded all that live, sort of spaced out around a microphone.
It was live. We were all together playing at once. That was the problem, too, because it's 11 minutes, I think. It was hot, really hot, like 95 degrees. We're all sweating.
I mean, it was just so hot in there, and my hands were slipping on the bass, and everything was just ridiculous.
We are two mariners, just all survivors in this belly of the whale. Its ships are sealing me, its guts are carpeting. I guess we have some time to kill.
It was great, because, like, people would step in, Colin would step in and sing and then back away.
May not remember me, I was a child of 3, and you were lad of 18. But I remember you, and I will relate to you, how our histories interweave.
Rachel was actually sitting back, down like, if you can imagine, church pews, and she was like down the aisleway with her little setup of tom and shaker, because she was too loud to be close to that microphone.
At the